Hello.
Hello, everybody. Hey, Hilary. I'm John from the Moon. How you doing, Hilary?
Great. How are you?
Awesome. I'm doing good. Got my coffee. I'm ready. I'm excited about this interview. Welcome, everybody. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Hilary Staff. If you don't mind, Hilary, I'm just going to give you a little introduction here.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I'm just going to read your bio. Hilary Staff is a Los Angeles-based music supervisor for television, film, and trailers. She's currently working on season 3 of Comedy Central's critically acclaimed show Corporate. Before that, she spent 10 years at Grammy award-winning indie record labels doing everything from project management to marketing to podcasts. When she's not working, she can be found feeding her wanderlust and herself, picking every loquat in the neighborhood, reading about brains, petting critters, tending her garden, and volunteering favorite nonprofits, Dub Lab and 826 LA. I got to say, there's a photo that that was sent over to us, and like, what's with the goats? Do you actually own goats?
No, I wish I owned a goat. That was at a farm I visited, and I just thought they were so cute, and I don't have any professional headshots, so that was the closest thing I got.
That's great. There's a place here called the Gentle Barn that I go to sometimes, and
I've heard of that.
A huge like collection of different farm animals, and yeah, I'm huge into animals myself, so yeah,
Cool.
I love it. So yeah, first we want to start off by just asking you a few questions, then we'll open things up to the chat here. I guess I wanted to start off by I just noticed on your bio there's just like so many different things it seems like that you have done over the course of your career in the music industry. I was wondering if maybe you could speak to how like the different skills that you've picked up over the years have helped put you in a position to succeed right now in what you're doing.
I would say that, I mean, I started in college. I started actually as a pre-med and voice major, which is kind of a weird combination. And quickly realized that I was bad at chemistry, so that left me with music. And then my parents, then it got to the point where my parents were like, "Are you going to be a voice teacher?" And I said no. And they said, "Are you going to be a professional singer?" And I said, "I don't think so." And they were like, "Well, what are you doing?" And so I ended up with the degree in psychology, but I minored in music and ended up getting really into like ethnomusicology and taking a lot of classes on like histories of different musics and where different genres kind of originate and where they have come from the beginning and whatnot. And so when I got out of college, one of my first label job was with a really small label in Atlanta called Dust to Digital. Oh, is it frozen? Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Um,
Second there.
it's called Dust to Digital. It's a really, really, oh, sorry, I didn't know about this. Oh, what kind of voice did I study? I studied mostly like choral and sacred music. Um, really nerdy stuff. um, but yeah, so Dust to Digital, they are like an archival reissue label, mostly like 20s, 30s, and 40s music, gospel, jazz, folk, country, like indigenous tube and throat singing, kind of a little bit of everything.
Wow.
Um, and so I started doing that, and it's a really, really small company. It's still just a husband and a wife that run it. And let's see, while I was there, we were nominated for like 3 or 4 different Grammys and won one of them. And usually they're still nominated every year for Best Historical Album or Best Packaging or Best, I think, liner notes they've been nominated for. And then I moved out to Los Angeles because I got an opportunity to work for another label called Light in the Attic Records, which is also a reissue label, but more stuff from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, I'd say, some 90s. So I spent a lot of my record label time kind of deep diving into old stuff and educating myself on things in different genres, and a lot of it was stuff that was overlooked or unappreciated at the time, or stuff that was never released. And we spent a lot of time kind of bringing that stuff back into existence, and or pressing stuff that was just demos and hadn't ever been pressed before, and kind of highlighting stuff that hadn't gotten the attention that it deserves for being as good as it was. And also that was another small label. And so there I had to do kind of everything marketing. Like I said, I produced and hosted a podcast, did the social media, did the digital media. So I was in charge of meeting with Apple and Spotify and getting our music like on playlists, because that's the main way that indie labels can make money. And while I was doing that, I had some friends that created a TV show called Corporate, and they knew me as the person to go to for music. And I had been interested in getting into music supervision. That was probably about 4 years ago. And they asked me if I wanted to supervise the pilot, and then it got picked up. And that's Corporate on Comedy Central. Now they're writing the 3rd season, and I'm in the process of doing music from that. And then I've also started on a project that's coming up on Hulu that I can't really talk about because it hasn't been announced yet. And then there's another one for Adult Swim that I'm working on.
That's exciting. And it sounds like from like you had no idea like early on like that this is where you would be with everything.
I'd always wanted to do that, but I didn't really know how. Like, like, yeah, I would love to be the person that picks the music that goes in movies and TV shows. Like, yeah, that sounds like a fake job, you know? Although, of course, if you've done it, it's a lot more than just picking the music. But yeah, I think I've talked to and met a lot of people who have been doing it a lot longer, and a lot of them had similar stories. Like Maggie Phillips, who's one of my favorite music supervisors. She went to college with the Duplass brothers, and it was the same type of thing where they were like, oh, it's our friend who knows a lot about music. And that's kind of where she got started as well. But yeah, it's kind of, labels are kind of a waning source of income, especially small labels. And music supervision seemed like a way that I could still help highlight like lesser known artists and kind of bring things into the public spotlight while still like being able to pay my own bills. So it was kind of like a balancing situation.
Great. What's kind of your day-to-day like as a music supervisor?
Well, right now, I guess I forgot that I also, my most recent full-time gig was at a trailer house, and I did music stuff for Trailer House, which was like a whole different monster than doing it for TV or film. There, when I was there, the day to day was pretty crazy because we would usually be working on, 5 to 10 projects at a time. And we had producers and editors and studios constantly asking us for polls on different things. They'd say, like, we need a mid-tempo female vocalist, like pop with lyrics that are about money, and so part of it was us going into our own drive and our own server and kind of doing our own searches, and then also reaching out to the different companies. And depending on the budget, it would usually, the studio would determine if it was like a needle drop cue, like if it was going to be something commercial or if it would be library music. And from there we would kind of reach out. Usually we have different contacts at different music libraries. Thank you. It's a good poster. You can see the whole thing. There it is. Very cool. We would reach out to different contacts at different production music companies, and they usually had point people who would kind of send us playlists that we could go through, and we would quick kind of split up the playlist and go through all that stuff. So at the Trailer House, it was a lot of that, and then also like contacting, like getting in touch with all the different labels, finding out, like searching the ASCAP and BMI and figuring out who owns every portion of every song. And if we couldn't figure that out, then trying to find a replacement song. A lot of it was, we often had to replace popular, expensive songs, with something that sounded similar that was cheaper. So that was like a common search that we had to do. And then we would also sometimes, if we needed custom work, dig into the composer archives and see what we had there. For TV shows, though, I mostly work from home, and it's a lot more chill. Like they're just right now for corporate, they're just finishing the scripts for season 3, but there are a couple of on-camera things that need to be cleared before they shoot. And right now we're working. That show has a really small music budget, so a lot of it is working with the Viacom Music Library, and like they have like Jingle Punks and like not Audio Machine, I can't remember, but they have like kind of a set of things that they own licenses to that were kind of committed to that. And then they have a small budget for commercial music that's kind of spread throughout. And then we also work with a composer to make incidental music, same composer that did the theme song.
So you bring up a really interesting point that there are times where you're reaching out to, your partners that you have to find songs, but a lot of times you're looking inside libraries that your company has a license to.
Yes.
And then that includes like Jingle Punks, like these major libraries where people can establish relationships to them and potentially get their music into those libraries. And then that's a way through which a company like yours could end up finding a song and putting it on a TV show.
Yes.
Very, very interesting. One thing that really, with everything that you talked about with the company that you worked for, taking older songs, like pressing stuff that like used to be in just demo format, it just makes me think that maybe more so than anybody that I've interviewed as like a music supervisor, you would have like a very unique insight as to like how like older music is kind of influencing what's happening right now. Are there any interesting trends that you're noticing right now in terms of like really old school stuff in some type of way coming into like what's happening right now in terms of music production, or just in terms of like people making stuff that sounds from a certain era?
Yeah, I think old soul is getting a lot of a spotlight right now. It could be skewed based on like what I'm personally watching, but I've seen a lot of old soul, like Numero Group is another reissue label, and I've been hearing a lot of their materials in different shows, especially on the streaming platforms like Hulu and Netflix. A lot of that is because there was a ton of old soul that was made, and a lot of it is really good and sounds similar to the things that became popular, but you can license them for much cheaper than like James Brown. You know, if you wanted to find, there's so much of it, and I think people are kind of just getting into that well. You know, they're like dipping in there and finding all this really cool stuff. And I think also you'll find there are a lot of newer people who are kind of going for that lo-fi kind of old soul sound. I've definitely heard a lot of that recently. Um, and it's still like really popular. I mean, even like Leon Bridges or like Nathaniel Rateliff and like that type of thing. There's a lot. I feel like that's probably the biggest throwback trend I've seen is like kind of lo-fi soul stuff.
Like vintage revival kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Cool. Uh, so you've already talked about like the different projects you're working on right now, and you kind of talked a little bit about how the company that you work for, basically like as a music supervisor, how you receive music that you would want to potentially use for projects. As far as like as a music supervisor, are people constantly approaching you with new music to check out? Are you how do you find like new music? How do people get new music to you? Do you have people that you kind of already trust that send you stuff?
Yeah, I think, well, the trust thing I'd say is really important because like especially when I was at the trailer house, I mean, we'd get 100 emails a day with new stuff. And if something came in that was just from like an individual person who none of us had ever heard of before, it probably wasn't going to get looked at. Like, not, no offense to anybody. Like, we just had, when you're getting 100 emails a day and each of those emails have like 3 or 4 albums, and you know where all these other ones are coming from, like some random person's email is usually the last priority, rather than getting emails from publishers or from libraries or from labels or even managers, any people that if it was something we had never heard of before, it was probably the more likely to kind of go to the bottom of the barrel, just because of time constraints. Like, and I mean, honestly, that's, the labels I worked for, like a lot of the stuff that we were bringing back is stuff that got overlooked and was really, really good, So I'm not to say that those things are bad. It's just, when you have a limited amount of hours in the day, you're like pressed with, you have a whole list of things you have to find, you have to kind of go with what you trust. So yeah, I'd say the best way to get your email open is to be associated with a company that people trust. Because yeah, I did open emails and respond to emails from individual people, but it was usually almost every time I did that, like they would be sending me things in the wrong format, or like they couldn't figure out, there was like, couldn't download it, it was only streaming, and it ended up just being like too much trouble for the time that I had available in the day.
Okay.
If
Sorry,
that makes sense.
cut you off.
Yeah.
Of course,
No, no,
yeah.
no.
No, so it totally, you might actually have somebody send you something that you really liked a lot, but it was just too much work to even get it to go past like the initial interest state.
Yeah. Like I like there was one person who like I think I stuck with it 4 times. He tried to send me a song, like his songs, and every time it was like an error, or like there was a password that was wrong, or like, and I honestly gave up because I was like, I'm getting like 60 other emails right now that I can just download right away and don't have to I tried, but it was like, okay, 4 times is my threshold, so I think like making it easy, yeah, making it simple and easy for the people you're sending it to actually receive. And for us at the trailer house, we almost, if it was only streaming and not downloadable, um, that usually went to the bottom too, because we need like files. We need the actual files. Disco, someone asked if I use Disco, and yeah, that was like Disco, receiving things from Disco is probably one of the easiest ways to get stuff. It's super easy and very user friendly. Dropbox is fine too.
Great. Yeah. Just making sure that like, if you send something over, that there's no dead links. It's not a link to some file that's on your hard drive, stuff like that. Cause that kind of stuff does happen even in the class that the 6-figure songwriting class that we teach. And it's just good practice for like when people might approach somebody like you. It's like, you know, you may not get a second chance to make an impression. So
Yeah.
super important, right?
Yeah.
How often do you use songs with vocals versus instrumental stuff?
Whew. It depends on the project, I would say. For corporate, we used a lot of vocals, but not from the library side of things. Excuse me. A lot of times when people want vocals, they want, I mean, well, I don't want to say a lot of times. I feel like in more drama type shows, they use a lot more indie vocals and kind of like, or library vocals. For something like corporate, we were probably using 80% library music, and all of that was instrumental. For the Hulu project I'm working on, it's kind of the mix. For trailers we used some vocals on library stuff, but mostly instrumentals, I would say. For featured songs, there were vocals a lot more.
Cool. Helpful to know. We're always like wondering what people are looking for. On that note, we got a bunch of students here at Catch the Moon that are looking, they're all eager to make music that companies that you like, that you've worked for, and just you as a music supervisor can use. What are some of the types of things that grab your attention about a song when you think it's good for, you know, it's just a good song, or it's something that would be potentially good for licensing for a show?
Um, it's hard to say in general because, like I said, if you're working on a drama, it'll be different than a comedy, than, you know, like a action project. I would say that a lot of times people are looking for energy, like good energy. Um, I would say that in my experience, the depressing cover song thing, I think that is done. Well, for me, I don't tap into that at all. Like the sad slow cover, like 80s cover songs, like I
Yeah.
don't mess with that at all. Amy Mann is great. Corporate, we used an Amy Mann song, and she was actually in an episode. And we actually did an original song that we uh asked, if you've seen oh my god, Magnolia, the movie Magnolia, there's a great Amy Mann song with like a montage of the characters singing, and we basically asked our composer to do like a new version of like his own version of that. And so yeah, that was not a cover, it was like a inspired by an Amy Mann song. um, but let's see, I'd say energy is good. I'd say, I mean, lyrics, like obviously the more vague the lyrics are, the easier it is to fit in. Um, because if you're talking about something really specific, you either need to have like the perfect project that is also talking about that specific thing, or but like, you know, money is a good one, like love, obviously, like family, like we have a lot of things. I have like a spreadsheet of things that are categorized by lyric content. If I'm Because a lot of times they want like, you know, something about fighting or like a race. You know, there are like common themes that you'll see pop up where it's like easy to match with different scenes without getting too specific. If that, I don't know if that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. It totally does. Um, Really, once again, really helpful. Thanks for sharing your insights on that. Are there any tips that you might give artists and producers on making songs easier to use on shows? Or is there anything you'd say makes it really difficult to use a song otherwise you'd want to use, aside from like not being able to play the song or stream it?
Sure. Having an instrumental, if it's a vocal song, and having stems available is probably the most important thing. Because there are some things where it's like, oh, if this didn't have horns in it, it would be perfect. Like the horns are too abrasive for this scene, or like if we could get rid of that bongo drum, it would be great. Like, you know, having stems for your songs, and definitely instrumentals at the trailer house, especially, like if there wasn't an instrumental for the song, it was almost always just eliminated, because the way that the editors have to, you know, cut out the vocals when there's dialogue a lot of the times, like if there wasn't an instrumental, or I mean it could work if there was like an instrumental break in the song that you could like loop, but you almost always need instrumental, and having stems is really valuable. I'd say those are like the biggest factors. And not having, I guess just not having like, usually for sync, if it's not going to be a featured song that's a really popular commercial song, they don't want super like abrasive stuff, because a lot of it is meant to be in the background. So if you think about, you know, like someone sitting in a coffee shop, or someone like walking through a park, like you're not, you want to keep it, there's a lot, it's hard to explain. Um, you want it to be not too unique.
I think I get what you're talking about. Nothing that's like too distinct.
Yeah.
A vocal that doesn't like really cut through stuff. You know, more a vocal that kind of sits back with the track, and the track doesn't really get in the way of anything.
Right.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah, that all, once again, all really helpful. I think that when you talk about stems and how there's like almost there's creative decisions that get made kind of on the cutting room floor in terms of you know, if you want to use a song, oh, we don't want the bongos in there, we don't want maybe the hi-hat is a little too like getting in the way of things, and we could take that out. So in a way, the creatives in when you're creating the show, you're kind of like almost producing stuff in a way. So if you have the stems, you'd be able to kind of make your own custom mix, and there's kind of like a creative aspect to all that it just having the stems maybe allows for that creative process to happen. And yeah, it's without that, it's like a no-go, huh?
Yeah. And it says, someone asked, would you want the stems already when a song gets submitted to you? I don't think that's necessary to send it with the stems, but to have them available if they ask is really like, because we've also had to drop songs when we weren't able to get the stems. Sometimes it's even like someone was out of town, or like the producer was out of town, and they were in the studio, but they didn't have them like on their computer, and it took too long, and it was just like, sorry.
You either got to have the producer ready to make the stems if they're not already there, or it could be a thing where you just have to get them when the track is produced, and kind of hope that you have everything that you need when the time comes.
Yeah, I mean, you could send them. I mean, I don't think it's necessary to send it with the main track, but you could say, you know, like be like stems available, you know, on request, or stems like just have to know that they exist is important.
That's interesting. Yeah, you're the first person to say like, so it's actually very helpful to you to know that stems are available for a song that you're being pitched.
If it's, because a lot of times, no matter what the music supervisor says, like it's ultimately up to the director, or, you know, in the aspect of trailers, it's up to the studio ultimately. And if the studio is like, I hate that bass drum, like, and you're like, oh, I can just get rid of that, it's fine, what about now? They might be like, okay, great, like we'll keep it. You know, if it's sometimes people are really picky, and it can be a matter of something that simple to like keep it or trash it, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's pretty much, Hillary, all the questions I have for you. I want to just open it up to the chat now, everybody in the group. You can either raise your hand or I can just start asking some questions here from the chat. Sarah was asking, I'd be interested to know if you also search on Taxi or Song Trader for songs, or in general, which libraries you mainly use.
I do not use those personally. Um, at the trailer house, we kind of had a set, like we had probably 200 libraries in our server. Um, Depending on the project, we like the ones we would use the most are probably like Audio Machine, Brand X, um, like Extreme. We used a lot. Like there's so many, I can't even think of them. Uh, there was I said Brand X. Those were like the main ones we used, but there's also Audio Network, Ninja Tracks, Sensit we used a lot, Montage. There's a ton of libraries that we would dip into. Although we did have like probably 10 that were like a more favored. Crucial, yeah, sure, we use Crucial. But yeah, those are probably the main ones. And for the TV shows, like I said, both Hulu and Comedy Central and Adult Swim, they all have libraries of their own that we're kind of beholden to. I can't really like go off. They say, you know, like we want most of the songs to come from our libraries, so they have their own. We're kind of committed to that. So I don't really have as much freedom to like go out and pick from different libraries with those shows.
And that's just a budget thing in terms of, for the most part, because they already own the rights to the songs.
Yeah, it's like a blanket deal.
Makes so sense that they can just like grab from their internal libraries. Totally.
Yeah, BMG Production Music was big. We use a lot of their stuff.
We got couple people who are asking about just like current projects. You did talk about the projects you're working on right now, just the kinds of music that you typically are reaching for right now when you're looking for stuff with the shows that you're working on.
Like I said, I can't really talk about the Hulu project because it hasn't, no details have been released. But for that, it's kind of it's based in South Central LA, so a lot of like kind of lowrider type culture music, which is old soul, generally old soul and R&B. With corporate, it's kind of all over the place, but also we use a ton of older stuff in that as well. Newer stuff, a lot of like post punk, or like minimal, like kind of garage rock type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, I don't work on like, at least so far, I haven't worked on like like a lot of big, broad stuff.
Yeah.
So usually the music I use is a little more niche because the projects themselves are more niche. But at the trailers, you know, we were looking a lot of pop, a lot of some hip hop, hip hop. Those were like the main ones at the trailer house. Like, especially we used a lot of library stuff for television promos for like CBS and NBC and Netflix and that kind of thing. It was like upbeat, fun pop with like a good like rhythms. They like trailers really like rhythms and like catchy like excitement. If that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. Yeah. I know that this question, it's been asked once, and there's probably going to be a bunch more variations of this question. We always have this question is just in terms of like your own professional boundaries and everything like that. If people did want to reach out to you in any way, is there some way that people could reach out to you with music? You know, and if obviously like whatever your answer is, we always teach people to be very respectful of everybody's boundaries in terms of that.
Yeah, I've gotten to the point where I have enough side projects to I think I'm actually going to make another email specifically for my music supervision stuff, because it's kind of gotten to the point where my regular email has gotten a little bit um, unwieldy. And I was actually going to do that today. So
Okay,
I could send you my new future
that'd be great. I totally relate,
music
by the
email.
way, to like after a point, there gets a point with your personal email where it can kind of get a little out of control. So yeah, obviously, if you wanted to share that with us, I can share with the group, and just let me know. And
Yeah, yeah, I'm gonna probably create that today so I can send it to you, because yeah, I like, I'm at a tipping point with my regular email.
let's see what other questions we got. Anybody got any questions for Hilary? She's been so good and so useful and helpful, giving us so much insights on everything. Let's see. What formats are stems usually, and can you save them to your computer if you don't have the same recording program that the tracks were recorded on?
Um, I usually just got stems as like AIFF files. That was usually what I was being sent.
Like high quality AIFFs?
Yeah,
Those usually are when you receive stems, are they usually in like mixed groups like drums, guitars, keyboard?
yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. So not even like so much individual tracks. If there's like 50 tracks in a session.
I've gotten that before, but yeah, it's usually like drums, horns, vocals, keys, etc.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Do you ever use rock music?
Sure. I'd say more popular for like action type stuff, or scenes where characters are like in a bar
Hmm.
or at a club, or like getting into trouble. You know, there's a lot of like mischief is good for rock music, or like rebellion, like teens being rebellious, that
uh,
kind of thing.
do you? What kind of music do you like in your time off? Like,
Gosh.
what do you like to listen to?
Truly everything. It's really one of the hardest questions to answer because it's really all over the place. I mean, I've let's see, what I went to a show recently that was like, let me look at my count, because I go to a lot of shows, and I try to go to shows of bands that I haven't heard of as well. Um, Usually from a trusted source. Um, let's see, I did go see Tom York at the Hollywood Bowl, or at the Greek, which was really cool. He's insane. Let's see. Do, do, do. Oh, there was a band called Songhoi Blues that I saw recently. They're from Mali, I think, and they were doing a US tour, and it's kind of like Afro funk, like really, really fun, like dancey Afro funk. It's really, really good.
Fun.
um, I also like Wise Blood. I've been listening to a lot of Wise Blood, like female song, kind of like Joni Mitchell-ish songwriting, singer songwriter stuff. But I also like hip hop, like Clipping and Shabazz Palaces, and classical, like Berlioz. You know, it's, I don't know if I can't really say that I have a specific thing I listen to, because it's kind of all over the place. Old country, you know.
Great. Yeah. That's cool. We got people asking for different types of genres of music. If it's stuff that you use, or Dionne Warwick music, be vintage as well.
Yeah, sure.
Do you have a need for 80s music?
If it's a period piece, yeah. I mean,
Mhm.
definitely if it's a period piece.
Would some smooth jazz music come under old soul vintage?
Probably not. I would say that's like easy listening.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's what I would say.
Makes sense. Let's see. We got any other questions? We got at least time permitting, we got at least like 15 minutes or so. If you still got the time, Hilary, if people have questions.
Sure.
Um, Anybody else have any questions for Hilary? feel free to, let me see if, oh, we did have somebody raise their hand. Sorry, I didn't have it scrolled to the top of the list. Hey, Anthony, what's up, man?
Hey guys, how's it going?
Hello.
So, you worked on Magnolia?
No.
Oh, okay.
I wish I worked on my.
I love
No,
that.
we worked on we did a custom song that was based on the Amy Mann song from Magnolia.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. I was thinking about the Amy Mann song. She did a cover of Drive on the Gianni Versace documentary. I don't know if you watched that or not. But,
I did. Yeah.
yeah, she did that. I thought that was pretty cool. But anyways, so you used to do your own music or?
No, just I mean just in school. I studied voice in school, but I'm not a musician myself. I mean I can play some instruments, but I'm not really a musician.
Okay. So what's some, as far as being a music supervisor, what's just some of your, what are some of the like things that you really enjoy about it?
I mean, like I said before, I really enjoy kind of introducing people to things they maybe haven't heard before. I like kind of being challenged and having to work within a budget is fun because there's so much good stuff that hasn't made it big, and it's nice to like be able to dive into kind of this sea of things that you wouldn't most people wouldn't otherwise ever encounter if unless you placed it in this TV show or movie. You know, it's like a chance to kind of spotlight something that might not have seen the light of day otherwise, and also just like using music to enhance a certain scene or a movie is like, I mean, most of my favorite movies you can specifically pinpoint the music that you remember, you know.
So is there like a an artist or a group that that no one had ever heard of until you place their music and then they kind of like, you
That
know, sort of,
no one had ever heard of.
or maybe that was just kind of, you know, like maybe didn't have a lot of followers or something, and then you kind of help boost their career by placing their song in something of yours?
I mean, last season in corporate, I put a song by this artist named Kareem, but that was from a song from the 70s. It was like an old disco song,
Uh-huh.
and most people no, I don't know, almost no one that I talked to, like really hardcore record digging people were like, oh man, that one, like deep, a deep cut. But most people were surprised about that. And also like the free design is like kind of another one that we put in there that most people have never heard of. I was getting like Facebook messages from like random people in the Midwest asking me like what that song was.
Oh, that's
Um,
cool.
but yeah, I'd say that those were pretty low on the like on the popularity poll, I guess.
Right. Okay, cool. All right. Hey, well, thanks for answering my questions. That's all I've
Sure,
got.
of course.
Awesome. Thanks for the question. We got some more here in the chat window. I know you touched upon this earlier that, you know, sometimes the companies, the trailer houses or just companies that you work for commission certain types of like custom songs. How frequently does that happen, would you say, in like the supervision world?
I think it happens depending on the project. Frequently, trailers especially do a lot of custom stuff because it's so specific, and it's so because you're working with the marketing team at the studio, and they have like this idea of what sells the movie, that sounds like, and so they will a lot of times if we used an older song, we would have a custom overlay created to kind of like punch it up. Like if they really really liked this one song but it didn't have like the oomph that they really wanted, we would commission a composer to have an overlay that would sit on top of that and provide all of the emphasis in the right places. So we would do that a lot. Yeah. And then for corporate, we had a lot, like the theme song we had custom made, and then like I said, we had the Amy Mann-esque song done. We use the same composer for all of our, for the theme song and for all the incidental music and for the custom music. We just used, but then yeah, we use the same one for that.
The next question, how many songs do you usually place in a week?
I don't know if I
How
understand.
frequently, it's probably more based on like the projects that you're working on, right? And
Yeah, I think yeah, that
are for that.
that would depend on how many projects I'm working on at any given point. Um, yeah, it's hard to say. Like for each show, it's usually somewhere. If you include library stuff, it's usually between like 3 and 8 songs per episode, and that's for like 23-minute episodes. So for hour-long shows, it would be more, but like depends on the budget as well.
Another question in terms of budget that was asked is like, what's typical budget for a series? If you can talk about that, and if you had to look for a track, notwithstanding the library commitment, what might the budget be? I'm not sure I understand that, but
Let's see.
yeah.
I had to look for a track notwithstanding the library commitment. Like a commercial, like for a commercial track. Or
I guess if you didn't have to use a library for a series, what might the budget be? Kind of if like looking at like the bigger picture of things. Guess what if you, yeah, okay, so he says that's it.
Wait, so sorry. Well, so what is the question?
What's the typical budget for a series, I guess, per episode? And if you had to look for a track, if you could look for tracks and not have to, if you didn't have the requirement to like pull from a library, how much money would you typically need budget-wise to kind of fill out a show?
Okay.
Maybe that's a better way of phrasing it.
Yeah, I mean, it truly depends. Like, I've worked on shows where the entire, 10-episode budget for music is $40,000 for like the entire show. But there are also shows where like at 40,000 for the music budget. Sorry, not for like the production budget. That would be very impressive. But also ones where it's like, 500,000 for like it depends on, if you're working on a show, especially like a Ryan Murphy show, for instance, like someone who has tons of money and tons of shows, like they will pay whatever. If it's the right song, they're kind of like, we're gonna pay for that. Like they don't like they can get whatever they want. Whereas like smaller shows or like smaller budget shows, it's like we're gonna have to replace anything that's popular probably is gonna have to get replaced for something cheaper. And it doesn't feel great to have to be like, we only have $5,000, for this song. But sometimes that's the case, and it's like, we'll go to a library or a publisher and be like, we have $5,000. Like, what do you have for us? And sometimes, if the artist or composer is like a big fan, then they'll like cut you a deal. But sometimes you're just SOL.
Next question we got. Sorry, I'm just adjusting my desk here. What does a show on Hulu pay an upfront fee to use songs, and do they report to the PROs? Like the streaming services, do they report to PROs?
Yeah, they should be. Anytime your stuff is used in a TV show, it should be reported to a PRO. That's like that if they're doing their job. Because I mean, that's not necessarily what I do. That's like they usually have a legal team. Like the studio has a legal team, and they are usually the ones that are responsible for that. So like Comedy Central, like I was doing, the searches and the contracts and whatever, but they have people on their side who are making sure that all of that stuff is accounted for, and like the session fees and whatnot are covered. So I mean, yeah, anytime a song is used in any show, you should be seeing money from that.
Hmm. I don't remember you saying this in like the number of your kind of gigs that you're doing right now, but somebody was asking if you teach vocals.
I did used to teach the youth choir at my synagogue when I was in high school.
Cool.
That's probably the last time I taught vocals.
What's the best way to get your song on a Spotify playlist? It sounds like maybe outside the purvey of a question you would typically ask a music supervisor, but
Well, I guess because I mentioned that I did that for Light in the Attic.
yeah.
And you know, a lot of my job was trying to answer that question myself. It's I like went to New York, met with our Spotify reps in person, like went to Culver City, met with our Apple reps like once a month in person, brought them records, you know, like did they have like a listening room where like we'd get some of the editors in the listening room. Like I don't think like individual people would necessarily have access to that.
Yeah.
It's really, really, truly, I mean, even for a label that is small but well known, it's like pulling teeth to get in there, because there's also the aspect of like the large labels kind of, I don't know, there's a payola type situation going on, where they kind of fill the playlist with major label things to like perpetuate those same labels getting money. And it's a cutthroat world, the digital streaming services. And I think the only way that we got stuff on there was because they liked our music, and I would like badger them. Like some Spotify had like a Google form for each genre, and you could fill out all this stuff. And they always really want to know what like marketing things you have available to go along with, like what would support, like is there a music video that is also out, is there like a new album coming out, are they touring, like they always wanted to know if there was like associated marketing materials that were available,
or just support in any way of that makes kind of the return on their investment of putting your stuff onto a playlist kind of more.
Or relevance also, like for instance, if a song was in a TV show or movie and that TV show or movie is really doing really well, then like Spotify might be making like a like This Is Us playlist. You know, I'm sure that exists. Like I'm sure if your song was in an episode of This Is Us, there's a Spotify This Is Us playlist. So, you know, like I was gonna say Game of Thrones, but that wasn't a very good example. But yeah, it's tough. I mean, I don't know if I have the answer to that, but I think it's you either are really popular or you have it placed in something that becomes really popular.
Here's a good question. Do you ever get the same song from two different libraries? And if so, how does that work out from a business perspective?
The same song from two different, aren't libraries
exclusive that you work with?
Yeah, I don't think because it's like that is that library's, like almost all the libraries I've worked with, it's like custom, like those composers are making stuff for that library. So I've never encountered that before.
Yeah. So I know that there are some non-exclusive libraries, but perhaps, I mean, it doesn't sound like you use any of those. It's more
commercial stuff you definitely get duplicates of. And for that, like as far as like getting whoever gets credit for it, it's kind of like who you like better, you know, who you have a relationship with. Like if you're getting the same song from multiple sources, then you're like, well, I had lunch with that guy and it was really nice. So
so would you say, and this is kind of like a rhetorical question, but the relationships are so important, correct?
Yeah.
it's it all boils down to relationships. After you have like a certain quality of music and a professional approach, it all boils down to the relationships you build with like real living, breathing human beings.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, like getting like blasted with emails again and again that are like cookie cutter, just like same, like there's so many of those, like you could just brush it aside. But yeah, like a lot of times, especially at the trailer house, we would get taken out to lunch by different people from different libraries, and a lot of times we didn't talk about like work stuff at all. Like it was not even about talking. Like maybe at the end they'd give us a thumb drive or something, or a drive to take home, but yeah, it was mostly just like getting to know people and feeling like you trust them and that they understand. When we do searches, if you frequently do searches and you send out searches and people send you stuff back that doesn't fit your searches ever, then like you're less likely to look at those searches. It's like if you ask for this type of song that has like this and this quality, and then they send you something else back that maybe is good but didn't follow your search guidelines at all. It's like, okay, well, this person obviously isn't they're not respecting my time. Like that type of thing was really annoying. Like even if it was good music, if we were asking for specific stuff and they just were like, yeah, try this out, and it had nothing to do with it, it would be like, what's happening?
You gotta be really careful when you're sending stuff out to make sure that's like on target to what is actually being asked for.
I think that's really important to like show that you're you actually are reading what you're being asked for.
Yeah, it's because a lot of cases, would you say it really needs to fit like a much narrower spectrum of music than maybe some people think is kind of like would fit in that bucket?
Yeah.
I think that's about all the time. I think that's all the time we have for today to ask questions. And I just wanted to say thank you, Hilary, for spending some time with us today. It's been a real pleasure to meet you and to ask you some questions, learn from you. I think I've just been reading through the chat and everybody's just, so grateful and happy that you've joined us.
Thank you guys.
When you can, get me that email and I'll pass it along to the group. And yeah, hopefully we can have you back again sometime soon.
Sure. Great. And have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you.
You too. All right. Take care, everybody.
Right. Bye.